All right, so thanks a lot for waiting, everyone, and welcome to this COP27 Bellona Pavilion discussion. And a very warm welcome to those of you who are just signing in online as well, and thanks for waiting. I think this week started really important because many of us attended the First Mover Coalition event on Tuesday. And I think where we saw Senator John Kerry and the key leaders from the FMC talk about their commitments and the need to create those viable markets. And today we're taking this debate further and sharpening it a bit to talk about cement, because we all know that cement is really one of the key sources of pollution in the world. So we've heard from many industrial leaders over the last couple of days that CCS is absolutely a must in order to achieve the climate targets. And one of the aspects of this discussion today is how do we make it happen? How do we accelerate it? How do we make it happen in terms of incentivizing mechanisms? And what kind of mechanisms that does actually work and does not work? So we'll hear from industry experts that are here today, a panel both from the industry itself and organizations that are supporting it. And today we are very happy to have Nancy Gills, program head from the Climate Action for First Mover Coalition. We have Hilde Rød, Senior Vice President for Sustainability in Equinor. We have Cédric Demus, Head of Group Public Affairs at Holcim. And Valborg Lundegaard, CEO at Aker Carbon Capture. Welcome to all of you. So I guess starting with you, Nancy, since we picked up on this event now on Tuesday, which was, I think, warmly welcomed. When we talked earlier last week, we talked about what FMC exists to show those projects that are actually moving and to create those markets which will actually drive this forward. So when you look back of the last year, I would say, what are the key moments now from last COP to now that you are most proud about?
Let's switch. So for those of you who may not know as much about the First Movers Coalition, just a little bit of information. First of all, I'm from the World Economic Forum. We are the co-chairs of the First Movers Coalition. We are honored to do that in partnership with the U.S. government and the State Department of the U.S. government, which is why Secretary John Kerry was part of an announcement event that we had here at COP27 earlier this week. And that announcement was that the First Movers Coalition now covers a new sector, not surprisingly, the cement and concrete sector. In recognition, of course, of the greenhouse gases associated, right? It's one of the hard-to-abate sectors that are identified. And so what does the First Movers Coalition actually do? It aggregates demand signals. It's a nice way of saying that it pulls forward companies who buy cement or concrete and basically asks them that when they're buying it, we want them to buy versions of cement and concrete that are incredibly low greenhouse gas associated, right? In fact, so low that it doesn't quite exist right now. Then why are we making purchasing agreements for something that doesn't quite exist? Because the way to actually put these products into the market is if the suppliers of those products happen to use new technologies, clean energy technologies, ones that we know are out there, but they're not yet commercial. So our program tries to get those companies to make a demand commitment for these products that could be on the market as a way to have the suppliers use the technologies and actually pull those technologies forward faster. This is what we call the transformative decarbonization. And of course, one of the technologies is carbon capture. And this is a technology that was identified as a necessary transformative technology for this sector by the Mission Possible Partnership, another program that the World Economic Forum fostered.
And let me just stop you there, because I think we all see those pledges coming, and it seems really easy to make them as well. But how is this COP different, from COP26?
So we launched at last COP, and as the question is, what has happened? Well, we went from 30 companies, which is already a good number of companies. We doubled the number of companies, so we're at 65. So you have more big name companies who are actually making this commitment. We also went from the one government to 9 additional, so there's now 10 governments who are part of it. Why do governments matter in this conversation? Who buys more cement and concrete? Governments. So this actually was a significant growth for the first movers. And we're super excited to continue to have the companies who join us, such as Aker, who are going to help have our members meet their commitments, because this is an area of technology where those members actually need more information, more unique partnerships, and that's why I'm actually super excited to be here today.
Super. So one of the few companies that are actually doing something today and are implementing, we actually have with us today. So both Equinor and Aker Carbon Capture is here. Now, Hilde, starting with you, what are you guys actually doing as we speak?
Well, thanks. We have an energy transition plan with really 3 main components in it. We're going to reduce our own emissions, mainly related to oil and gas production. We're going to grow our renewables capacity with 30 times. So offshore wind is our main tool there. And then the third part is really low carbon solutions, where it's CCS and hydrogen that are the key technologies. And we see that we can use our capabilities from oil and gas and really that technology that we already have. We've been involved in CCS for more than 20 years. We can use that to develop new solutions that help other sectors decarbonize. So, and it's been a really exciting year for us, because we are involved in some real projects on CCS and also see hydrogen coming. So, we're involved in the Northern Lights project, as are you. So that is the world's first open source CCS project, together with the Norwegian government and partners. We're really aiming for creating open source CCS storage in the CCS. And our first customer is Heidelberg Cement, so that's a cement company. And with the purpose is really we're now building actually this, so it will be in operations a year or so from now. And it's about capturing CO2 from the cement factory, transporting it by ship, and then injecting it into reservoirs in the Northern Sea and using that for permanent CO2 storage. So that will be 4 million tons of CO2 per year, but of course a big upscaling potential.
And I guess that's a segue over to you, Valborg, because looking back, in 2011 we started with Heidelberg Cement Norcem, and 2024, the CO2 is going to be stored in the Northern Lights project. What has been the journey so far, and what has been most exciting?
Yeah, that's a long and exciting history. But let me start with where we are right now. So following up Hilde's comment, we are actually now in the construction phase of delivering this first carbon capture plant on a cement facility in Norway for Heidelberg Cement Norcem. This will be in operation in 2024. So even though there's a lot of prospects in the pipeline, we are first out. And it's important for me to start, by saying our technology is proven. Many talk about we have to do various technology development and so on. Yes, we have to do that. We have to continue improve all the time. But we are ready now. So that's why we need to accelerate that. But going back, what happened in 2011? Of course, for our customer, Heidelberg Cement or Heidelberg Materials, as they have rebranded themselves, they started this journey. They were looking at energy efficiency. That is always the first thing our customers look at to decarbonize. Then they were looking at changing their feedstock, replacing fossil fuel with waste and even biogenic feedstock. And of course that helps also with the overall decarbonization. But for the cement industry, there is only one technology that can really remove the CO2 emissions properly, because the CO2 comes from the process itself, and that's carbon capture and storage. So we had a mobile test unit. And after working a long time with Heidelberg Materials Norcem, we installed this mobile test unit at the site in Brevik and made sure that we could demonstrate that our technology worked. And in parallel, we worked with a full-scale implementation of CCS. And in particular, we worked with the heat integration because this cement plant had excess heat available, which allowed us to have quite a unique offering when it's come to heat and electricity demand.
So, but we're not the only ones. And Cedric, you guys were recently awarded EU Innovation Fund funding for 2 projects, actually. Tell us about where they are and what type of projects they are.
Okay, good. I think what I'm going to say is that we're not a hard-to-abate sector, we're full of opportunity to abate sector. I'll start with a project in Germany, in Legedorf, and I will set the actual context in which this project is set, because I think that's almost the most interesting thing. Ørsted energy company provides renewable energy offshore that is brought on land to a cracker that makes green hydrogen. That process produces excess oxygen that we use with a process called oxyfuel to inject oxygen into our kiln and capture the CO2, purify it, and provide it to a chemical company. That chemical company uses it with the green hydrogen to produce e-fuel. And the e-fuel is provided to the airport of Hamburg. So you have a full closed loop hydrogen value chain in which you have carbon capture in a cement plant, but which serves to respond into a, let's say, regional carbon management requirement. So there it's really capture on a large scale, roughly 1 million ton, using what we call the oxyfuel technology. And that's what we call CCU, carbon capture and use. The other project located in Poland, in Kujawi, uses a very similar technology, but the main difference is that the captured CO2 will be transported by train and then by boat to Northern Lights for geological storage. And perhaps I could talk about another 30 projects, but I'm not going to because we don't have the time. But the point I would like to make is that each and every CCUS project that we're involved in will look different, will use a different technology and will use a different value chain because of the regulatory barriers that exist. If we're in Austria, but you can't store geologically, so you have to transport it somewhere to store it. Because of the energy availability, because of the local constraints. So we need to, when we approach CCUS, especially for the FMC, trying to be creative, but consider all possible avenues of carbon capture, storage, and usage. So I think I'll stop there.
So let me stop you there and then say, well, that's really good segue over to you then, Hilda, because there is a change now. We've come from these first-of-a-kind projects and we're seeing the first commercial projects. What does that mean for the Northern Lights as a project and the other projects that you have in your portfolio?
I think that's really key because what we've seen is tremendous growth in interest, and we see that also the interest grows when the CO2 prices rise, like they've done with the EU ETS prices, for example, because then this is really seen as commercially viable. So we have had sort of the first commercial offtake agreement signed with Yara, a member of the First Mover Coalition, this summer as well. And I think it's so important because it sends a signal, and I think there are some tipping points also in this type of industry that you really need. You need some first movers, and you need, of course, the financial and economic viability, but I think it sends a signal that this is a real solution and something we can put into action. And we're also working in the UK, in the Humber region, with the UK government, but also with partners on the decarbonisation of a cluster there in the Humber region, using CCS and hydrogen, and that is something that has the potential to to actually deliver more than half of the UK's ambition of 5 gigawatts installed capacity on hydrogen. So I think that's another example of sort of moving from plans or ambitions to actually starting on the ground.
Excellent. And if we look at more on the incentivization system, and over to you, Nancy, because in the US there's been a long tradition of involving private investment into trying to solve problems. And we've seen I would say, quite surprising maybe, the IRA coming this summer, which really have turned the whole market in the US in terms of these projects and make them much more viable. How successful, if you look into the broader perspective of US, how successful have these type of schemes been, on other sectors, and what can we expect coming out of this? Because I guess we're just seeing the first glance of what to come out there.
Yeah, I think what IRA did as far as really creating a new policy environment that you don't see elsewhere, it really became, by the US government, an opportunity to put what we call the carrot forward. So this is where we're now seeing the price of certain investments reduced significantly because of IRA's existence. And so we, from a first mover's perspective, think that this will be a tremendous opportunity to actually have those who are working with facilities and who can take advantage of IRA to be meeting their commitments because of IRA. And part of the conversation, you can always tell when you're saying something that somebody might not like. They just turn off the microphone. So, but I thought I was saying good information. But I think the value add, of course, is, and I'm not a representative of the United States or of the government, so I have no hand, but from the First Movers Coalition perspective, we do hear from our members about the positive impact of this kind of carrot approach versus a regulatory, stick approach. And as I mentioned, we do have now 10 government partners in which we're drawing to their attention the value that IRA may provide for providers of particularly carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So that's our hope for that as well.
And Cedric, you've of course not just a presence here in Europe, but also in the US. What kind of mechanisms have you been using when you work with your 30 projects in your portfolio in the US?
So look, in the US, the obvious fact, there is no carbon price. So the only funding mechanism in this space is the famous tax credit I never know if it's 45Q or Q45. I always put it the wrong way. Anyway, so that's the mechanism that is available and that is used so far in the projects. But the fact is that the cost of deployment of CCUS projects at scale remain superior to the financing available. So the IRA is of course welcome and will certainly help to deploy more projects at scale. Now, an additional thought on that, because if we do CCUS, in the end is to decarbonize our facilities, but it's also to put decarbonized cement on the market. And you need to create a demand on the market. In more advanced, in regions where you're a more, let's say, elaborate carbon pricing mechanism, this is arriving, let's say, timidly. In the US, what our teams are telling me is that the market's not quite there yet. So IRA is great news, and we really welcome it. At the same time, let's look at how you address consumers, how you address public procurement, how you address the interface between the manufacturing and the actual market through fiscal measures or others, or procurement measures, in order to create that demand. Because it may seem far removed from the technology that you provide and you deploy, but in fact, if we look at the the business case for a given plant to invest large amounts of money, a significant part of the business case is to look at your market. What are you going to put on the market? What is your demand? How much are you going to be able to sell it? And so we need to have both ends meet, and that's why we're so passionate about the FMC. Is merging the demand and the supply. It makes total sense, and the same in the regulatory framework would be welcome.
That's a very interesting observation. Valborg, how are you seeing the IRI as a company that supplies technology solutions into this market?
Well, when we set up a pure play company about 2 years ago, we selected to prioritize Northern Europe. Not only because we had a lot of requests from customers in this region, but also because we saw that the regulatory regime was more mature here. But I must say, United States, you took me by surprise in August. And when things happen over there, it happened fast. And I will not be surprised if we see a bigger market and more acceleration in the US than we will see in Europe now throughout the decade. But we cannot enter the North American market alone, even though immediately when the IRA was signed, we got a number of requests from customers in US. But we're looking for partnerships. We have a partner here in Northern Lights. I have another partner on Iceland, also on storage. So there are many partnerships, but we have partnerships that are also very active in the US. Like Siemens Energy, Microsoft are key partners to us. And we are really seeking partnerships. And I think the collaboration across companies working in various phases of the value chain, looking to really solve this big crisis of climate change, that is what we need.
Hilde, you in Equinor, you are not only focusing, as you said, on CCS, but also on wind projects, and you are already in US and seeing some of the developments and mechanisms work and what doesn't work. What are the key things that are roadblocks for you now when you operate in the US, and what have you seen that needs to be done in order to not stumble on these roadblocks?
Thanks. So we have 2 large offshore wind projects outside of New York, Empire Wind and Beacon Wind, very exciting, and an example of that was actually done before the IRA. So it has been possible to do something in the US, but it's been in certain states. So I think we're very also positively surprised of the IRA and the fact it provides opportunities both for offshore wind and renewables, but also low carbon solutions. And but it's interesting whether you discuss with colleagues in Europe or in Brazil or in the US, it's always the same concern I hear, and that's about permitting, the time it takes, and the capacity, I guess, also on the government side to be able to process these new areas. So it's the same story really everywhere, and I think also in the US that permitting processes and consenting processes take a very long time. Just as an example, we're developing the Dogger Bank project, which is the world's largest offshore wind park outside of UK. And we got involved in 2011. And it's taken sort of until now before we're in the construction phase. And the construction phase is a very, very short part, but it will take sort of 14 years from you start bidding until you have the first electron. And I think that's time we don't have. So I think in all areas of the world, we just actually need to speed up and find ways of doing the consenting processes faster. And actually, another roadblock, we hear a lot about technology and finance, etc. What we see more than technology or finance, it's about having acreage, whether it's for offshore wind or it's for CCS, you actually need land. And you need something to bid on. So there are lots of companies interested, but we also need real projects and real licenses to bid for and get started. So that's the concern.
So Nancy, you're not representing the US government today, but you've probably also seen earlier decarbonisation efforts happen in the US, initiatives that have worked, and how you've overcome such roadblocks. What would be your recommendation to the US government?
I think the recommendation to the U.S. government is to continue doing what they're doing right now. IRA was a tremendous investment, one of the most forward-leaning climate change-related policy documents that have come out. And I actually hope that being program head for the First Movers Coalition and having these other governments, that we can create that similar enabling environment in more countries and really make this something that actually starts stimulating in a time frame that's necessary the type of investments that we see. We also, I think, see from a First Movers Coalition perspective the challenge of permitting. And that's, again, something that we hope is a conversation that we can honestly engage in. Because right now we do need to have honest conversations about the costs associated with the timelines that we currently find from a regulatory perspective. And we're all here at COP27, right? Governments included. This is a government policy conversation. So we really need to talk about what can we do about permitting and have some of these solutions come to the forefront faster. That'd be my feedback.
At Holcim, you've worked with government and regulations and tried to, clear out some of these roadblocks to your green transition plans that you have made public. What are the things that you need to really push forward here at COP27 in order to get further on your plans?
Look, I'll start by repeating something I've said before. When you are deploying carbon capture projects, your regulatory, permitting, and even social acceptance environment dictates what you can or can't do. This is not necessarily a constraint, but it directs you into a certain technological path. For example, if we're in Austria, we have a plant that we're working on for a carbon capture project. It's in the foothills of the Alps. There is zero infrastructure to bring the carbon far away or far enough to the sea. But there is an industrial value chain down in the valley that requires purified CO2. Now, the sort of message we get from the policymaker is that the idea with CCUS is permanent removal or permanent storage. I totally get it from let's say a climatic environmental point of view. But there are places where it will be difficult to achieve. And we have other constraints. There is, at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is one storage, let me call hall, in Europe. We are working on dozens of projects for which we submitting permitting application, financing applications. You develop your business case. I can't do it on an hypothetical storage location in the Mediterranean or somewhere else in the North Sea. I have to work with what I have today. So the message I have towards regulators is that perfect is probably enemy of good. We need to advance, we need to deploy the technologies, we need to scale up and have industrial projects. And yes, some of the first ones will be a reuse of CO2 in an industrial value chain for e-plastic, for e-fuels, for farming, for different applications. And some others will be permanent geological storage. And in the end, they'll probably be all geological storage when we will have the capacity to do so. But so let's say, open and focus on having projects emerging.
All right, so we are getting quickly towards the end, but there are 2 points on my thing that I want to talk about, and of course one of them is costs. And Valborg, this is a question that often comes up when we talk about CCS. What has been the journey for Aker Carbon Capture in reducing cost, and what can you promise Cedric and other cement producers in the future here?
I'd like to tell you the story about how we reduce the cost for our medium-sized plants. And we delivered the Technology Center Mongstad in 2012. This is the most sophisticated technology center for carbon capture in the world. But it became extremely expensive, and that was the headlines in the newspaper. The market didn't really come at that point in time, but we continued the work. And in Aker, we're a big supplier to the oil and gas industry with complex topsides. And we use the experience that we have from that industry to modularize, standardize our technology and our concept. And we were able to reduce the footprint of a similar type plant with 90%. And the cost similarly, almost 90% reduction. This is learning by doing, it's modularization, standardization. And you should never underestimate the effect of going from the first of a kind to the second. So right now, we are delivering one of these medium-sized plants to a waste-to-energy provider in the Netherlands. And this is a CCU project, just like you described, because storage is not available. However, the same journey we will now go through with our larger plants, because we can use the same principle and the cost will be substantially reduced from what we are delivering right now for the Longship project to the next. And that is what we have to do. We cannot start from scratch every time. We have to build onto the learnings from those first-of-a-kind projects, and then we can accelerate.
All right, so we're getting very close to the end here, but I have one more task for you, and it's a little bit of a challenge because I wanted to get something out of you that was not scripted. And so before we close off this debate, I wanted you to think about one ask from one panel member that you would like to present to the audience here today. You know, something that you want from another panel member in order to actually meet those, what we're here for, to do something about hard-to-abate industry and cement in particular. So I'll start with you, Valborg, just since you are closest.
Okay, so 2 days ago, I was in a panel with the CEO of Equinor, Anders Opedal, and I challenged him. You should make your final investment decision on the second phase of Northern Lights right away, because storage is a bottleneck, like we've heard here in this panel. However, since I've already done that, I won't challenge you, Hilde. I will go to Holcim. And I believe that the winners in the cement industry in the future will be those first movers. So I would like to challenge you to bring back to your whole company, organization, why don't we raise the flag and see Holcim, we are the bold first movers. Yes. Is that a contract?
All right. So then I'm going to go over to you, Cedric.
I'm not going to challenge any of you, but I'm going to have two asks. The first one, let's ban the use hard-to-abate. We can abate. The second one, I think, is to work closely together, because you are all part of the same value chain that we're trying to develop with the technology, with the storage facilities, with, let's say, the political environment in which you create a dynamic, and we need all of it. And I think we need to carry, I think we have mostly all the same messages. We're all moving to the same direction, and we should really work closely. I work a lot in Brussels, in the regulatory environment in Brussels. There's very little movement on carbon capture and usage. It's quite limited. So let's make some noise, and let's spread the news that carbon capture and usage is possible. We need it, it's financeable, and we can do it. So let's work together.
I'll pick up on that, and first some good news also to Cedric on the storage. We have 2 new licenses, Smeaheia and Polaris, so there will be more storage capacity going forward. But I think I would very much like to pick up on you, and maybe my challenge then will go to the First Mover Coalition and Nancy. First of all, great work already being done. I think, as you mentioned, Cedric, you know, how do you create demand, or how do you also address more the consumer side and awareness around this? And to do that, I think we need policies. There is still the economic models that need help. So could we do something? Is there possibility to do even more together through the First Mover Coalition on the more policy and advocacy side, making sure that all the companies go together and try to make change happen faster and at scale?
So, you know, we're the first movers, and from that perspective, I haven't asked, but I don't want to constrain it just here. It is of all, but it's everybody here, it's everybody who might be watching, which is, we have a program that's called First Mover, but if you are a leader in an organization and you believe in addressing climate change and you want to put your financial dollars, your procurement dollars towards your values, then there's no reason you can't be a first mover. And there's no reason that your choices can't support these companies in your purchasing decisions, because absent that, absent a change of behavior by every company, by what you decide, what you buy, and you have the carbon version and the reduced carbon version, then these COPs won't matter. And so that's my ask. That's my ask.
Excellent. So thank you very much for those in the room, for those of you joining online. Thanks to the excellent panel for interesting conversation. Join in on here on the Bellona Pavilion for more interesting debates over the next couple of days. Thanks a lot.